Good morning to everybody. It is my great pleasure to attend the launching ceremony for the book Undergraduate ELT in Sri Lanka by Dr. Asantha Attanayake and speak a few words about it today. I was indeed very pleased to hear that Asantha had published her doctoral thesis, because many doctoral and MA theses usually collect dust in the libraries of universities with nobody making use of it. And as an ELT practitioner for 5.5 decades, as a teacher, educator, and academic, I read this book with great interest, and I found it very, very informative. Today we have gathered here to hold the launching of the book with the earnest hope that the concerned parties will take the issues raised about second language teaching in Sri Lankan universities into serious consideration, and these issues will be addressed promptly. There are a number of reasons why everyone should consider Asantha's book as an important contribution to ELT at university level. First, the book is based on original research undertaken by Dr. Asantha Attanayake. She has clearly identified the objectives of the research to explore policies, general practices, and perceptions of undergraduates and university teachers of English in Sri Lankan universities. Based on these objectives, she has formulated the research questions and hypotheses. In plain language, I can say that she has followed a rigorous scientific methodology in her study, which makes her findings valid, reliable, and objective. Second, this research has been conducted about the practices and perceptions of ELT in Sri Lankan universities by a person who has been involved in ELT practices at university level. This makes it very authentic and authoritative. That's why I say that this work is a very important contribution to ELT at university level in Sri Lanka. Now, moving on to the issues raised, the author questions as to whether our university ELTUs serve their intended purpose. She says in her book, quote, "Graduates in contemporary Sri Lanka are criticized as being unemployable." She further mentions, quote, "Graduates predominantly from the Faculty of Arts are left with little more than a degree certificate that does not qualify them for modern professions," unquote. This is a very obvious fact. Many of the graduates pass out obtaining a certificate which does not help them to find a job. And this is because they have to leave the university without having employability skills such as communication, teamwork, problem solving, decision making, willingness to learn from others, self-reliance, etc. Under this circumstance, graduate employment has become a severe problem in Sri Lanka. In many situations, the reality is that the degree qualification alone does not help enough to find a job because of the mismatch between the demand and the supply of the job market. Confirming this, it was mentioned in the business section of the Daily Mirror of 1st of May that according to the central bank's latest report, the gap between the job creators and job seekers has further widened, which has resulted in labor scarcity. The report further states that if the issue is not promptly addressed, the job creators would be compelled to import workforce. The author in her book says it is important to identify why graduates cannot find suitable jobs as soon as they pass out of the universities. The most important point she presents is graduates' lack of English communication skills. From my point of view, there are many other causes leading to this situation. One is the mode of teaching and the mode of assessment carried out in the universities and schools. And the other is the failure on the part of the university lecturers and school teachers to encourage learners to take responsibility for their own learning, that is to promote learner autonomy. I think the latter point was mentioned by one of the respondents among the university teachers in Asantha's survey. These problems arise as a result of teaching in both universities and schools being exam-oriented. This is because education today has become a process of filling their minds, of students filling their minds with the content of books and lecture notes, emptying the content in the examination halls, and returning empty-headed. The true education should enable one to utilize the knowledge and skills acquired to meet the challenges of life with self-confidence. In order to overcome the problem of employability, teachers in both the universities, this includes departments of all faculties as well, and schools should change their mode of teaching from lecture mode to group mode, cooperative learning, etc., which would equip learners with employability skills the employers are looking for. Although the current trend in education is based on the principles of learner-centeredness and learning to learn, it is regrettable that most teachers do not follow these principles. In addition, the mode of assessment, which allows students merely to reproduce their notes, should be changed. Continuous assessment should be taken more seriously by teachers, giving students a feedback on their performance. Teachers should be made aware that the main purpose of continuous assessment is to help learners to improve, not to prove that they are good or bad. Further, the summative assessment should be based on Bloom's taxonomy, testing knowledge, comprehension, application, analysis, synthesis, and evaluation. There is yet another aspect of this problem. Most of those who gain university entrance lack competence in English. It is now a public perception that English language teaching at schools in Sri Lanka has not been able to achieve the intended objectives. This failure, in my opinion, is not just a baseless assumption. It is what we have experienced for the last 30 or so years. In a recent publication, I can't exactly remember who conducted the study, there was an indication that teachers' language level and pedagogic competence make it very difficult for them to handle the advanced level general English materials with any degree of effectiveness. I think this is very true. If we ignore this truth and speak only of the outcomes of ELT at university level, we are really ignoring the cause and trying to treat the effect. It is a well-known fact that nobody takes the advanced level general English test paper seriously because a pass in the subject is not a prerequisite for university admission. I was involved in this exam for 15 years, and the pass rate has never been more than 36. Considering the fact that of the 5% of the A-level students who sit the exam that gain admission to the 15 state universities, around 3% follow various courses in the English medium. If a certain degree of weight is given to the paper, perhaps by means of a reasonable proportion for the Z-score, this situation can be changed. And there will not be high degree of dropouts from the courses that are taught in English in the universities, as mentioned by the author in her book. When English is given due recognition at national examinations, it is possible to expect a certain amount of attitudinal change, and such changes in educational policies are more important than wasting money on mega projects. What I'm trying to say is we must be able to explore the causes leading to the situation we experience at present, and then we must recognize appropriate strategies. Sometimes a slight change in a policy may be enough. It is for this purpose that Asantha's book should be interpreted with utmost care. Those findings should be interpreted without being biased, so that we can identify the policies or identify what policies or what other changes are necessary. This can be connected to what I have been telling for a very long period about ELT at schools. We cannot think of ELT at universities completely ignoring ELT at school. I have been telling that ELT methodologies being practiced at schools have not been successful, not because of the pitfalls of these methodologies, but due to shortcomings in their implementation. Today, English language teaching in the government schools has become a hilarious comedy of errors and a game of passing the buck. Parents and education authorities blame the teachers, and the teachers in turn blame the students for lack of interest and also the course books used to teach English. And in response to this, curriculum developers try to change the course books and the methodology used to teach English every 10 years. Every change is followed by intensive teacher training program, and millions of rupees are spent on all this, but to no avail. All this is because the authorities concerned are trying to resolve this issue without identifying the cause of the issue. It is like a doctor trying to treat a patient without proper diagnosis. Another facet of this issue is lack of autonomy on the part of the teachers and lack of ability to think for themselves. According to my opinion, this must have resulted from the way they were taught in schools. I say this based on my personal experience as a teacher educator. I have conducted hundreds of workshops for thousands of teachers all over the country. And at the end of each workshop, I am paid glowing tributes, both written and oral, by the participants. But I have never been flattered by all this, because I know for certain only 10% of those participants will put to use the skills and knowledge gained from the workshops. And this now restrains me from conducting any workshops for teachers. And ignorant of this fact, some of the respondents among the university teachers in Dr. Attanayake's study were envious of school teachers whom they thought were in a better position than them just because they received in-service training through workshops and seminars. Teachers play a vital role in educating the students and broadening their perspectives in life and bringing attitudinal changes in them. Therefore, a teacher should be dedicated to his or her profession. He or she has to have a vision and professional ethics. In short, a teacher should consider teaching as a vocation and not as a job. This is the very reason why I always include a session on the characteristics of a good teacher as part of the training courses I have designed. Now, returning back to the ELT in the universities, I was not happy about many students disliking reading because it lays the foundation for all other skills. Further, it is said that the best way to gain command of a language is to live among the speakers of that language. And the second best way is to read widely in that language. Perhaps if the prescribed criteria for selecting reading texts are followed by the university teachers of English, students may not complain about the text being boring. In addition, if the process approach to teaching reading, which would help learners to read and understand text independently, was used, I'm sure the students would find reading more meaningful and would have a positive attitude towards reading. There has been a mixed feeling about learning grammar among the student respondents. I think if the aim of grammar teaching is to enable learners to communicate, students will find it more useful. In Sri Lanka, grammar teaching has not been very successful because the method used to teach grammar helps learners only to gain explicit knowledge of grammar. One cannot expect learners to communicate in English unless they have gained implicit knowledge of grammar. Going through the teachers' responses, I found that many of them, quote, believe that lack of teacher training is the main factor that results in poor teaching, unquote. It is true that the prerequisite for recruitment of university teachers of English is an honors degree in English, and such teachers would not know much about the methodology of teaching. But I don't think we can accept this as the cause of poor teaching, for there is plenty of ELT-related material on websites, and I'm sure all the universities will have books relevant to English language teaching in their libraries. Further, I have myself conducted workshops to ELTU staff in all the universities except the East. And I'm sure many other resource persons would have done the same. However, we should take into account the fact that this research was carried out more than 10 years ago. Now, most of the ELTUs have been raised to the status of departments, and there have been remarkable change for the better in some of them. A case in point is the ELTU at the University of Sri Jayawardhanapura. When Mrs. Madhubhashini Disanayaka Ratnayaka took over the English language teaching unit at the University of Sri Jayawardhanapura as the head in 2012, she bravely undertook the Herculean task of putting the place in order, which she successfully did. And this made work easier for her successor. Due to Madhubhashini's initiative, now the ELTU at SJP is a hive of activity. She introduced various activities in English which would motivate the students and sustain their interest. It is a concern for her students that made her work untiringly and unstintingly with commitment in order to give them the best, for she very well knew that without a good command of English, there was no future for those students unless they want to become politicians. I think the teachers in all the ELTDs and ELTUs must read her book, A 1,000-Voiced Choir, a memoir of the first 2 years as the head of the English language teaching unit, University of Sri Jayawardhanapura, in which she records her achievements. It should be mentioned here that at the launch of this book and another titled Grammar Through Literature, 2 undergraduates from SJP spoke about their experience in learning English at the ELTU with so much confidence which amazed the audience. I would like to I don't want to speak at length because I've been given only 15 to 20 minutes, right? And I would like to now conclude my speech by congratulating Dr. Asantha Attanayake on her contribution to ELT in the universities and wishing her success in all her future endeavors. And I also wish to thank Asantha for inviting me to this book launch and to speak a few words. Thank you.